Okay, now we're recording for real. I'm not lying this time.
I
So,
see that.
okay, so I was just about to ask you about, well, I did ask you about theory U, and you said you have experience with circling and it's somehow related there. So I'm just curious to hear about that.
Yeah, so I'm Yanique. I'm in Toronto, Canada. Um, and my experience with Theory U is I've been doing it for like 4 years. I started by taking a course offered by MIT's Presencing Institute, which is where this theory was kind of developed and deployed from. And it's essentially, and I heard you talking with Lorene about leadership. So this is like a methodology for translating sort of a more mindful kind of outlook into leadership action. And a lot of it is based on listening
Hmm.
very closely and very carefully. And one of the most valuable pieces of it I found is that they distinguish four different levels of listening. So it moves from downloading, that's kind of the more surface level where we are listening from a place of our habitual patterns. And then it goes down to factual, empathetic, and the bottom level is generative. Um,
Factual, empathetic, and then generative. Okay.
yeah,
So,
so the factual level is, mhm, go ahead.
no, I was just going to ask more about it. So please continue.
Yeah, so downloading, like I said, is when you're listening from your kind of habitual patterns of judgment. And when you move into a factual level, it's you're able to start noticing differences, and that correlates to a debate sort of frame. And the empathetic level correlates to a dialogue kind of frame, where you are actually listening empathetically, like from within to the other person, and listening to how what they're saying or conveying is resonating with you, but doing so in a way that doesn't involve sort of the judgment and cynicism and like attaching things to what they're saying. You just kind of receive it, and then you would respond from that place of like deeper openness. And the final level, the deepest one, would be generative, where you're able to, and I guess this would correspond kind of to the logos, where you are listening and speaking from a place that allows the new to come into life.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I find that those distinctions have been really helpful for me in noticing in myself like where I am at any given moment or in any given situation. And there's also practices for moving through those levels. So if you notice that like, okay, and this is a situation that's happened to me, like I might be talking to my partner and I find that, he's trying to communicate to me in an empathetic way, like he's trying to elicit empathy from me, but I'm like at a debating kind of
Hmm.
level. So I'm saying back to him like, well, what you're saying isn't really true and there isn't really
Hmm.
any fact in that, but like that's not what the need is in the moment. So then recognizing that and then being able to shift and like meet people where they are is, yeah,
Right.
good. That's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds useful. And yeah, you jumped right to something I was going to say, which is that the generative level sounds a lot like how I think of dialogos. And then I would also say that I'm worried that I'm speaking too much out of ignorance, but from what I understand of circling, that seems to line up with the empathetic listening level. Does that seem the case to you, or?
In my experience, yeah, like circling seems to be a practice, like an empathy practice. Um, I've done it with a group in Toronto called Authentic Relating Toronto, and
Hmm.
I see those guys like Taylor, I think, who is one of the community leaders there. He was at the Rebel Wisdom Festival, and I saw him there in the chat and things. And what they do is like they sort of play these like games. I don't know if you've had experience with circling at all.
No, I really
Have
haven't.
you?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so one of the games they play is like basically the noticing game. You sit with someone and you're gonna stare at them, and it can be really uncomfortable if you're not used to that kind of thing. And you just notice things like, oh, I noticed that, I don't know, maybe my hair is a little unsymmetrical, or I noticed that you are, you're really quiet, or you seem to be thinking really deeply about something.
Hmm.
and you just let the person like notice in turn on you. So there isn't any like, there's no small talk, there's no going off into anything. You just take turns doing that noticing. And I'm trying to think of what other circling games they play. But even doing something like that, like it sounds so simple, but you're put in that situation, you're offered those constraints, and it's interesting to see like how your mind operates within that, and sometimes fails to operate within that. Like you start going off and saying other things, and you have to notice like, okay, no, that's not the instructions. So it's good training, I think.
Okay. Yeah, someone just recently, I think they described it as meditating with a group. Circling is somehow group meditation.
Yeah, that is how I describe it to people who aren't at all familiar with it.
Yeah. There's like an emphasis on noticing in both cases, or at least with certain kinds of meditation, the ones I'm familiar with anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And doing so without judgment is a big thing.
Yeah. Right. Noticing without the judgment, right? And so with theory, I think earlier you mentioned or implied that this is somehow related to your work. Is that right?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of wild. So I work in a sector called social innovations, and it's basically in the nonprofit world, their attempt to, I guess, innovate in the way that they do things. So solving social problems, but not from kind of an old model of thinking where you identify a problem and you think about how can I fix this as quickly as possible. If you take the example of homelessness, like the traditional fix for homelessness is to set up shelters, which doesn't actually address the problem that people don't have permanent housing because you're just providing them temporary housing.
Yeah.
They have to go somewhere after that. So it's kind of applying systems thinking and systems theories to like really chronic social problems and looking at the factors that create those situations and then addressing it from the root cause rather than treating symptoms.
Yeah. Makes me think of like warm data, Nora Bateson's thing about warm data.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Nora Bateson is like a big reason that I was at that Rebel Wisdom Festival because I wouldn't say that I am very deep into the Rebel Wisdom community. Like I watch some of their content, but I haven't really delved in there. I guess maybe because they're based in London and it just kind of seems like they're talking about different things sometimes. But when I realized that she was going to be there and that Douglas Rushkoff was going to be there, I was like,
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you planning to go to the event or like the in-person event, or was it that now that it's online and free?
I didn't even know about the in-person event. I had no awareness of that.
Yeah. When I first heard that they were going to make it online, I was really disappointed and sad. But now I feel like there were particular things about the event that could only have happened because it was done online. You know, how they got speakers to talk to each other in a very generative fashion, and then how they were able to pull audience members up into the conversation. Yeah, it was cool to be a part of.
So I was curious about your experience of the festival. How much of it did you witness?
Yeah, well, I was there the whole 2 days. I mean, I made it a priority. So when I wasn't in a breakout room, I think the best way to describe it is that I got what I get from watching their videos online. I watched a lot of their videos, plus the feeling of being there, which adds something, and then just that feeling of being there. So that added something to it. But the real value I got was from the breakout sessions, and that's why I'm sort of on this track right now. And I think so many people have responded in a similar way, and I think it has to do with the self-selection of the crowd that showed up. And then also, I think some of us, certainly I was, modeling the types of conversations that I watched people on the channel having. So that, my experience was just that I was just driven. I needed to do something to make it happen again. You know, that's sort of what I remember of it. I mean, and I frantically took notes, like especially when it was, I think it was Nora Bateson and John Vervaeke and Jordan Hall, that discussion.
Yeah.
That was amazing, and I just took a bunch of notes. I still haven't gone over them. But yeah, I just got so much more value out of it than I thought I would, and I was expecting quite a bit from it from the beginning. So yeah.
Yeah, in that particular conversation with Nora, John, and Jordan,
Yeah.
one of the things I noticed people saying in the chat was like, they were liking it to music. They're like, oh, I see Jordan's like dancing.
Yeah.
And a few people were like, this is kind of like a freestyle rap battle. Like they all seem to be sort of firing things off, and like there is like a melodic kind of linkage between them. But at the same time, I don't know, I feel like everything kind of landed here for me. It like landed all in the head. And I was kind of missing the embodied kind of aspect of that, like the heart in the hand aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I
Yeah.
think was echoed by some people who were like, well, what do we do now? What are we supposed to do together? We're all here, you know, like Douglas Rushkoff, I'll find the others. And okay, we're here with the others, and now what?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that three-way conversation, I think Jordan Hall and John Vervaeke are very good at having those kinds of conversations. In my last video, I linked to there's a particular group of 4 that I think it's just, they're exploring dialogos in the most brilliant way. But I think they're generating their own jargon, and I think that kind of makes it to where sometimes it can only land in the head, because it's such a mental effort just to follow along. Yeah, but I also like, and this is another one of the things that has kept coming up, is the balance. Either people like express an appreciation for the balance between the head and something more embodied, or they say there should be something more embodied. But either way, it's nice that that's the focus, like that we should target that kind of balance. Yeah. So I want to ask you, what comes to mind when you think of that three-way conversation? Did you take much away from it? Was it easy to follow? I guess maybe that's the first question, because I've been following that stuff for a while.
So it was easy to follow because I'm familiar with all those thinkers and familiar with their jargon to a certain degree. I don't know if I really took anything out of it that was like extra in the realm of knowledge. What I kind of took away from it was more of a feeling. And that had to do a lot with, I mean, you can see that those guys are like excited to be talking to each other, which is always incredible to witness. That like, yeah, they're also amazing in their own way, but there isn't any like sort of attachment or fear of each other or like competition between them, which is really refreshing, especially in this, anybody who does like very head-based kind of work. There often tends to be that kind of edge to it, and an unwillingness to fully engage and explore together, or
It's
you're
like
afraid to reveal your own ignorance of something.
Yeah, and if I have a system I'm trying to explain to people, I might be more invested in laying that out and making sure you understand what I'm saying rather than exploring, right? Yeah, and I think you're right to say that.
It was great modeling. And it was also like the chat was a big part of that experience for me. Like seeing so many people, and it's not like a YouTube chat where anyone can just walk in and say any stupid thing. It's like a bunch of people who are all very committed to exploring, very committed to doing so in good faith and in charitable spirit, and they all had like brilliant things to say and brilliant things to share. And yeah, just being a part of that energy was like fantastic.
Yeah. Someone recently said to me that I think it was on one of the Discords. No, it was in, so Rebel Wisdom just yesterday did like a members call where they asked for what were people's experiences at the festival. And someone said that, just lost it now, what was it? Oh, that what they get from it is a sense of home, but a sense of tribe, but without having to subscribe to a particular way of thinking or a particular ideology. And so
Yeah.
you can feel comfortable and feel like that's your people, but not have to sign up for anything, not have to, fill some check boxes of belief or action or whatever. Just the commitment to explore together seems to be that's the common theme, and I think that's why people are had such a positive response. And the David and Ali said during that call that like it's not the first time they've heard that about the breakout room. So it wasn't it wasn't just this event that occurred in. So, but yeah, that's a cool. I just like that image of home where you don't need to subscribe to a particular belief set. It's cool.
Yeah, and it's important to have that, right? And that it kind of speaks to that lack of judgment thing again. I find that especially on social media, because that's another aspect of my work, though I'm trying to kind of step out of that out of that realm a little bit. Because my background is in psychology, and then I went and studied some marketing because I figured, well, I could go use my psychology in this part of the world. And the more I learned about marketing, like the more I disliked marketing and marketers. And the more I learned about social media and just kind of how it's programmed and the really negative effects it can have on people, and in particular young women. Jonathan Haidt had done a lot of work on that. Yeah. Especially when I look at what's happening now in the US and how much people feel pressured to participate in it. Because if you don't participate, like if you don't post your opinion, you're somehow on the wrong side already. So it's not enough to even like listen and learn things. Like even if you are ignorant, it's like mandatory that you have something to say.
Yeah.
And then of course, once you say something, a bunch of people are going to come along and correct you and tell you why you're wrong. And basically everybody's wrong. Like everybody is telling everybody else that they are wrong. Because only I am right. Only I'm right ever. My opinion is the one to have.
Yeah.
And I mean, how far is that going to get? In theory, the term that they use for that is the cycle of absencing, as opposed to the cycle of presencing, which has to do with absencing. Yeah, where you sort of let your negative internal voices drive your behavior.
And you're absent. You're not really engaged. You're just kind
You're
of
not present.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's operating from downloading when you really should be on a deeper level.
Yeah.
You're using your mental projections to operate in the world when the world that you're trying to affect no longer matches the projections that you developed at whatever time in the past. It's like it's not relevant anymore, but you can't see that because you have the filter on, like so rigidly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess what just came to my mind just now is that the time, it's not the time to be certain. It's becoming less and less the time to be certain, in these weeks and months ahead. And I think it's only going to get worse personally, or more confusing, maybe I should say. Those kinds of, if you have an ideology fixed and you're operating, sort of downloading passively, you're not really active, you're going to miss so much of what's going on. And not only will you miss like receiving information, you're not even looking at the world fully, but also you're missing the chance to contribute and help people solve the problems. And because you're not even engaging with
reality.
I want to say, I was almost going to say reality.
Yeah.
But it's like you're engaging with your own reality, I guess, but maybe it's just that you're not really engaging with, like, what would you say? Like, I don't want to say a deeper form of reality, because then it makes it sound like I think that I have the vision into the deeper form of reality. But yeah, I guess you're just
maybe
not.
It's a shared.
Yeah, there's something about, I think, yeah, shared reality, and it also, maybe you're just not open to complexity. You're not open. Well, you're certainly not open. I think that's part of the problem. It's like you're trying to tell the world what it is rather than be open to what is coming in.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. In theory, we talk about, you know, in parallel with moving through those levels, there's like you open your mind first of all, and that's how you access the second level. You open your heart, that's how you access the
Mm.
empathetic level. You open your will, like your ability and your capacity to act, and that's
Mm.
how you get to the generative level.
I like that a
But
lot. That gave me goosebumps. The will thing. That's great. You open your will. It's like, yeah, because in my mind, dialogos, or I think generative conversation, however similar those are, it's about putting something above every other person in the group. And I can't really connect that with words to what you're saying about will, but it seems to be a connection there. Uh,
yeah,
huh.
there's another term that I learned. Um, I don't think this is from Theory U, but I can't remember the source of it. But they call it the circle being. It might be something from indigenous philosophy.
Hmm.
But it's this new form of being that is created when, like the Bible would say, two or three are gathered in my name,
Mm.
um,
Yeah,
around
that.
some kind of shared purpose. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
You collectively create this new thing that is transcendent to the individuals,
Yeah,
but is just as real as the individuals. And you each like feed it with
yes.
your own energy. And that
Yeah,
can be like the most powerful thing.
yeah, yeah, I love it. That's very much, I, I like to call it dialogos, but whatever it is that you just described, forget about the terms. That's what I'm like going after. And did you just say that phrase again? You said, something circling. What did you said? There's like
Circle being, the
circle
circle being.
being. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's
And
really
then you can
nice.
like name when it becomes present in a conversation. Like you,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like a silence that settles.
Mm.
And sometimes it's just something someone says and like that goosebumps feeling. You're like, oh shit, the circle being is here. It's
Yes,
arrived. So
that's
yeah.
great. Yeah, there's like a similar idea, or, well, same idea or whatever, of the third. Like that's how I think Vervaeke talks about it, or they also use Geist, as in poltergeist or zeitgeist. There's the Geist, like
Mm-hmm.
the spirit, which then gets back to like the Holy Spirit, which gets back to the Bible quote that you mentioned, which that Bible quote has been coming up more and more for me, and I'm certainly not somebody who studies the Bible, but yeah, just the whole idea of that you treat the conversation as if it's a being, yeah, that has manifested. Um, Another thing that comes to mind, don't know how relevant it is, but also that these four guys that I follow a lot that I think do a good job, Vervaeke and them, um,
So
they,
who are your four?
okay, so
Sorry.
there's, and I'll put a link on in this video too, but it's John Vervaeke, um, Jordan Hall, then Chris I don't know, it's a tough last name, Chris something, and Guy Sengstock. The last two
Right.
are sort of less known, but the way they riff is just incredible. They also use the metaphor of jazz a lot, um, and they're just incredible to watch. Um, and I forgot what I was talking about earlier, but yeah, they're great. Maybe something about the third. That
Yeah.
they've noticed a few times that you find yourself in it. You know, you start a conversation, you're going for a while, and then suddenly, oh, here it is. It's not like, oh, it appeared and I just watched it appear. It's like, oh, it's around us right now. So that's just kind of interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to move into like more teaching of these things, and I've been doing that a little bit. Like this workshop that I think I mentioned that I'm doing tomorrow is I'm kind of helping to coach a group through like a theory U prototyping cycle. So they're
Hmm.
trying to create something, and we're using theory U to do that. And just as you're describing, like you find yourself there. Like I never go in knowing like how am I going to bring this group of
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
into this place, and
Yeah.
it's so scary.
It
Like
is.
I have
It
to do
is.
this tomorrow, and I'm like,
Yes.
do I even know how to do this?
Yeah.
I I don't know how to do it, but I have the ability to do it.
And I suspect the trust as well, right? Would that be too much to guess? Because,
um, like in what sense?
well, I find that the more I can trust the conversation and trust, like, I guess I have certain um, principles, or I try, it's like I try to have a certain conversational poise, you know, and I try to place myself in my mental state in a certain way, but then it's not that I engineer it into being, it's that I behave in a certain way and trust that it will come. So that's when I say trust, that's what I mean. Um, and because it is also scary for me, especially like these videos I'm doing now, and anything that I'm stepped out forward and say, let's do this. And then of course I'm nervous that I might fail and make a fool of myself or whatever. Um, I guess, just for me, that's how that's that's what brings me to do them anyway. It's because I find that it's scary, but I trust something anyway, and then it happens. At least enough of the time for it to be worth it, you know. So
Sounds kind of like faith.
yeah, oh yes, oh yeah, and I'm really getting comfortable with the idea of faith too. I as I sort of implied earlier, my background is very much anti-religious, you know, um, and slowly over the past few years, I've become more. I've just become comfortable with the idea that not only can the Bible just contain wisdom and just traditions in general, not only can these traditions contain wisdom, but also that actually maybe it's better to say that there's these two fundamental ways of looking at the world. There's the scientific objective, I, it kind of thing going on, and that's not wrong, but neither is it wrong to think in terms of something harder to grasp, something more mysterious. And I'm really getting, especially in these times today, I'm getting way more comfortable with mythopoetic language like faith and there's another one that's come up a lot for me. It's blessed. Like I'm often finding myself, there's no way to describe how I feel other than saying I feel blessed. I'm so blessed to have whatever it is, you know, this morning, or especially sort of the opportunities I feel that are happening around me. So yeah, that's just where I'm at with that stuff. And it's all seems to be becoming more relevant. And I think it's maybe partially just due to my own trajectory, but also partially due to the times that we're in.
Yeah, it's like that kind of language and that kind of thinking has become necessary and needed. And I just want to, jump back a little bit to like just offer and express my appreciation for what you're doing, because it is a scary thing to like jump out in front of a crowd this size and go, hey guys,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the guy.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's awesome. It's really great to see, and it's inspiring as well. So thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
Well, doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We're doing it right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. I feel called to do it. And I mean, I suppose there's some amount of self-development to even hear the call necessary, you know, so I can take some credit.
Big time.
But also, to a certain degree, all I can really say is that it's almost like I had no choice in a way. I mean, choice is a weird one. Choice is a tricky concept, but of course I had the choice of what to do, but it was almost like in the conversation with those four, they say there's something about beauty where you don't consent to finding something beautiful. You're just, it draws you in, you know, and then you find yourself captured by something that's beautiful. And to some degree, that's how I feel about this stuff. I was at the festival and I thought, God, I just, there's nothing for it but to but to start asking and answering the question, how do I get more of this? So anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but thank you for that. It's nice to hear.
Yeah, well, it's good that you're doing it, so I'm happy to see it.
Cool.
And about the word blessed, I personally struggle with that word. So when you said that, it really landed for me. I'm like, yeah, fuck, blessed, come on.
Yeah.
But it's so true, like more and more, like that is the word that describes the feeling. And so you just have to kind of like give into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Personally, like I grew up in a very religious household, so I had a lot of that language kind of like beaten into me.
Yeah.
Like literally. And when I left home and went to university, I went through a process of peeling all of that off and just throwing it away, like wholesale, just throwing it away. Like, I don't believe in any of this anymore.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I believe. I guess this is just it, and I'll just do whatever feels good in the moment and just live by my impulses.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really wasn't until, I guess, finding Theory U was part of it. And that was also like this very weird, I was pursuing like professional things, and then I stumbled into this, and it was just so transformative that I came out of it like wanting a different career and like moving back home so that I could put everything that I was doing down for a year and just figure out like, who the hell am I and what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
And it's weird, like, doing that at 26, 27.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not, I don't know. I don't think that's too weird of an age if you think about it. You know, like all the,
Yeah, more and more, it's a feature of the culture, I guess.
yeah. And a lot of rock stars die at 27. And Jordan Peterson has this thing where he says, like, that's when you decide to like give up the meaningless, there's a word, hedonistic lifestyle.
Yes.
And then you decide, no, I'm going to move on from that. Or you don't decide, and then you sort of, you know, either die or I don't know what else. But, and it also sounds like you were kind of, because, and maybe I sort of filled in part of your story listening to you. So let me just speak it back.
Well, you filled in a good part, which was Jordan Peterson. So like actually a part of my story.
What a prophet, man. He's such a prophet. I hope we see more of him, you know? Really hope so. But
he's doing well.
So you said that you started from a religious almost like soil. That's just where you were when you were formed. And then you broke away from that and stripped all of it off. And so then the part that I maybe filled in was like, well, you sort of said it too, like you sort of follow your impulses, do what feels good or something along those lines. And then now it sounds like you're moving back into, well, I guess dealing with meaning like it's a real thing, if that's not too much to say.
Yeah. I guess internally, it's, the word I use is purpose. And I guess that's kind of related to this, the Japanese ikigai kind of big level sort of purpose.
Yeah.
Like, and it's often a nesting process. So like, what is life for? What is being for? And then within that, like, the very context that I'm in, what's happening in the context that I'm in, and like, where do I feel most pulled? And what is my actual skill set? Like, what am I endowed with that other people aren't? What's special about me? And that's often the clue to like what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a process. I don't know. It took me like, I don't know. You're never done, right? So,
sure.
But I would say it.
I'm
33.
Okay, so that was like 6 years ago that you kind of moved back home and kind of started seriously figuring stuff out, it sounds like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's funny because even though I studied philosophy and psychology, like that's my degree, like none of these ideas were even a factor at the time. Like I went through 4 years of just like immersing myself in that material, and like it didn't lead to any kind of transformation or any kind of deeper understanding. So that's another kind of paradox that I'm curious about, why things didn't click at that time.
Yeah, well, the thing that comes to my mind is that university is so academic and disconnected from the personal. you know, you learn from textbooks and you learn about, I don't know, it just all feels so impersonal. I went to
Yeah.
university for engineering. I ended up dropping out. That was, I mean, I liked it, but uh, I don't think of the subject matter as ever really affecting me personally beyond, you know, I took thermodynamics. I like that. Now I know how a fridge works. That gives me pleasure. I like that. I know that, you know. But yeah, going to university courses never really connected to me personally, I think. Of course, the context of college is different. You meet friends and people are in the particular stage of their life and there's meaning in that, or a personal connection in that anyway. But anyway, that would be my guess. It's just not very personal type of learning.
Yeah, it really isn't. I just felt a lot of pressure to get A's, and so my focus was really just to pass, pass, pass,
Mm-hmm.
pass, pass,
Mm-hmm.
and just moving from one thing to the next.
Yeah. And you know, that's not exploring either. That's learning. It's like memorizing. I wonder if there's a
Especially
connection there.
psychology.
Right. Yeah. Who would you be a student to explore? What are you thinking? That would be like the reaction, I would imagine, you know, even if it's just
Yeah,
imagined.
because read these papers. Yeah, it's just like reading material and proving to your TAs that you've read it by
Yeah.
being able to regurgitate
That's
certain
right.
things in certain orders.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm really interested, one of the reasons I was really interested to talk to you was that I was pretty fascinated by your idea of, like, yes, breakout rooms, and like how can you design a conversational landscape that would allow the magic of the breakout rooms to sort of bubble up to the surface in a very like bottom up process of emergence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask if you're familiar with this platform called Hopin, because I know you've been talking a lot about Zoom, but there's this other thing that's just like, it's really new. I think you have to get on the wait list for it so far. But it is Zoom-like, I suppose, but it goes like way beyond.
Okay.
So it would be really great for hosting something of this nature because it has like a different tabs. So one of them is like a main stage area. So it's literally like thinking of it as a festival. You have a main stage area, you have booths, so you can have different people setting up different booths and there's concurrent things going on. And then there's also like areas for networking where it functions like a chat roulette. So you can walk in and get matched with either one other person, two other people, three other people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
I'm going to just
when I
type that real quick. It's hop in, just like the two words.
Yeah.
Hop in. Yeah, I'll have to look for that.
Yeah. So when I was listening to you talk about that I immediately thought of that platform. I was like, I'm pretty sure you could achieve that on this in a way that's less complicated than trying to do it on Zoom.
Yeah, I do get the sense that Zoom is almost accidentally sort of good at what we want to do, you know, like we're kind of lucky in a way, and we can't really expect Zoom to keep up with how we're going to iterate forward. I think we're going to move a lot faster. So it's always, that's cool. It's really, that sounds very promising. I'll have to look into that for sure.
Yeah, and I don't remember hearing about it before COVID-19, which leads me to believe that they probably developed this in response to Zoom not being able to do certain things.
Yeah.
Especially when, people are getting into hosting events in the thousands of participants. Like, it requires something else.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a level of freedom like that you would have in a real world situation to wander around that you don't have on Zoom. Like you can't just go wandering from breakout room to breakout room or from a main plenary thing to somewhere else. But this platform kind of gives you that freedom to move around within like a much larger event.
Yeah, and that makes me think in terms of collective intelligence. You know, I like to think in terms of people being neurons in a brain. And if you think about an event where you can move around freely, you're actually giving more freedom for like networks to form. You know, you're not just sort of stuck by chance in this group, and then you maybe have one or two other options to exit. It's more free flowing, and so then you'll wander around and get caught in a conversation where, you know, I wander around and hear someone say Dia Logos, and I go, oh, you know, go over there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so excited to see how the technology changes. I mean, that's a whole thing. I almost have to stop myself from getting overexcited about it, because I, as a programmer, want to go and build the things, and it's like, I feel like there's more effective things to do, just because Zoom is close enough. So for me, it's like, okay, let's just see what we can do with Zoom. But I really feel like, I guess for me, it adds a positive element to the whole theme of we're on a big, we're about to go into a huge cultural shift. It's starting now, which the idea of these platforms, these online platforms, growing into this niche of whatever it is we're all trying to do here, that adds a really positive element, like, to that theme. Like, wow, I can't wait. I can't wait, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in the US?
I'm from the US, but I'm in South Africa now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the lot.
What brought you to South Africa?
So I'm here for work. I work in cryptocurrency, and I met a guy at a convention, and we've been working we're business partners on a project for, it's been over a year now. I'll put a link to that in the video too, just because it won't hurt to plug it a bit. But yeah, it's a cryptocurrency thing, which I also think that cryptocurrency will play a big role at some point in this shift. I think it'll provide it'll give us a lot of systems that nobody owns, but everyone can trust, and is built transparently from the ground up. And you know, we haven't yet gotten to the end user, so I don't try to get people into cryptocurrency, because I understand it's just not useful for most people. But we're getting there, and it's going to be very cool, I think.
Yeah. I've been very curious about cryptocurrencies, but I don't know how to get into them, I think is the thing. Or like, what would be the use of it to me?
Honestly, the answer is almost nothing, because so what I get out of it is that I'm excited about what can be built on it, and so I'm happy to be a part of that process. And you know, if I were to try to sit down and write about all the developments that went on in the last year, they would pretty much all be tools that make building the systems better. It's almost never like something that my mom will care about. It's more the stuff that we need to build first, just to make it easier to build the stuff, you know, that other people will care about. I mean, you know, if you want to invest, you could do that. That's almost, and if you're a digital nomad, let's say you're moving around a lot, then you might actually have some advantages for holding cryptocurrency, because you don't have to move it from the country you left to the country you're in. You just have to solve one problem, which is how do you go from cryptocurrency to the country you're in, which, well, it's varying levels of ease and difficulty there. But other than those two use cases, there's really not much today.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it'll come to you. It'll just like the internet. The internet was suddenly everywhere. It'll be the same with cryptocurrency, I'm quite sure.
Yeah, I'm really excited by, you know, people who are out there prototyping new things. Like, it may not have a use right now, but we can kind of see how it would be useful, given the fact that our current systems look very much like they're about to full-on collapse.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really believe in repair at this point.
Yeah.
Or even desire repair.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So that kind of brings me to something I've been asking people a lot lately, which is, well, okay, I'll ask you a slightly different version of it. What I usually ask people, what I think you've already sort of answered, is like, do you believe that we are on the cusp of a significant societal change, and that COVID is just the trigger? But maybe what I'd like to ask you instead is, how do you, so like, I feel varying levels of discomfort with that belief, because it's kind of a crazy thing, you know, crazy in the conventional sense. And so it makes me, it's like I have this discomfort with it. So my question then to you is, how's your relationship to that idea?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, really big question.
Hmm.
So I guess I'll answer both those questions.
Okay.
So I do, in some sense, believe that we are on the cusp of some big, like, maybe catastrophe is a general enough term to cover whatever it happens to be. But within that, one, to be, Petersonian, it depends on what you mean by system, right? Like, what are you referring to exactly? What's included in that?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then also being on the cusp of something
Hmm.
on like a human time scale versus a cosmic time scale is very different. So
Yeah.
I think that we're on the cusp of something, but we've been on the cusp of it for much longer than COVID-19.
Hmm.
It started way in the past. Like we've had the 2008 economic crisis was a big deal, and people thought that the world was going to end then for various reasons, but we kind of skated through.
Yeah.
But all the fixes, like we've had a lot of fixes, but
Yeah.
we've had no solutions. So the
Hmm.
problems keep recurring, and they are recurring at a faster and faster rate. So as that rate continues to accelerate, we get closer and closer to whatever that catastrophic event is going to be. Will it take 2 decades? Will it take 50 years? Will it take 100 years? We don't know. But the other shift that I see, and I find this a lot easier to point to that shift for people, like as a way of making that really big idea like really present.
Okay.
I point to a shift from not a shift from US global hegemony to Chinese global hegemony. And
Hmm.
I think it's easier for people to see that shift and understand it that way as
Hmm.
like one system, like an American English speaking system breaking down and like this Chinese system kind of rising up. And then having that basic understanding, then it's easier to kind of extrapolate further. Like, okay, so if China's following similar rules to we are, how long before whatever it is that they're building or creating needs to be either evolved or morphed into something different, or it's going to follow the same pattern that we followed. So I don't know. I guess my relationship to that idea is just, I guess it's a little bit of like just trusting the process. I'm I'm conscious of the temptation to fall all the way into the abyss of like the world's coming to an end. Like the world's not coming to an end. The world's gonna be fine. Like what
Hmm.
we do is a different question.
Hmm.
Are we going to be fine? Is our civilization going to be fine in its present form? Probably not. But
Hmm.
it will take some other form.
Hmm.
And our responsibility now is to help make that new thing as, I'm going to use the word sustainable, even though it might be charged like politically,
Hmm.
but sustainable in the sense that it can prolong itself. It can be the type of system that mimics life as closely as possible. Like
Yeah.
life sustains itself. Life is it grows organically. We don't grow forever. Like if you do, that's a disorder, and you don't
Hmm.
tend to live that long, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we grow when it's necessary. We get to a point that's kind of like stable, and then over time we die. Like
Yeah.
so this idea, I think we have the society built on some very problematic assumptions. And again, like if we can't repair the foundations because either they're too old or the structure itself is too far gone, then our responsibility is to build a new thing and to integrate the lessons
Hmm.
from what we have now. And I also have and I like to always presence this like a gratitude for the systems that we have. Yes, they
Hmm.
have problems with them, but like at the same time, we all live inside them and we all benefit from them to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
This idea of like,
Capitalism brought us Zoom, and here we are, sort of thing.
it brought us Zoom, it brought us these smartphones, it brought us
Mm.
all the technology that allows me to talk to you in South Africa right now,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
have these, you know, hopefully generative conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that, yeah, some people might benefit more than others, but the idea that some people are benefit and then everybody else is just like zero is, it's not true. Like, some people have gotten to zero and we have to address that, but like, it isn't that stark, and it's not that black and white. So
Right.
there needs to be a level of gratitude and love towards what we have, and
Yeah.
just an acknowledgement that we can do better.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I've ever really held those two thoughts together like that, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate your use of the word presencing. That's interesting. I'm going to try to pick that up. Presencing an idea, but yeah, those ideas of that even if it seems inevitable that we're heading for a collapse of these systems, it doesn't mean that they deserve to be like aggressively burned down or torn down. And
Because then what do you have?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing to that too is that there is no system like absent the people who inhabit it. So when you're attacking a building that belongs to a corporation that you don't like, you're not attacking the corporation directly. A corporation is an idea. You're not attacking the idea directly. What you are attacking is the people, you know, who work there or who in other ways depend on it for their livelihood. Are they all evil because they happen to work at this place?
Right.
Probably not. And then there's, you know, the nature of it is that we're all interconnected. So you doing damage for the sake of doing damage and the sake of destroying an idea it creates, you know, again, it's damage, right? It's doing harm. It's the cycle of absencing. It leads to destruction, and if you take it, you know, to its fullest extent, it leads all the way to genocide. So for me, the best option is not to occupy that particular mental space at all.
So I actually want to ask you more about what you just said, because I didn't quite, I just want to hear more about, you said the cycle of absencing, and that was an idea from back in the conversation. Could you just fill out more about how that, because so I have in my head the image of there's a building, a proposition would be let's destroy the building because it's going to go away anyway and it's not serving us anymore. And you're saying, no, there are people at stake within this system, and then the building's kind of metaphorical for me. And then you said the thing about, the absencing, how does that fit in there?
Yeah, so absencing is a theory U term, and it's basically the opposite of presencing. So the way that they visualize it is there's like a circle, and the bottom half of the circle, when you go down through the levels of listening, is the cycle of presencing. So you can go down through there, you connect with a deeper source of insight, and then you prototype as you come up the other end. The cycle of absencing, you further entrench your beliefs, you escalate situations, you eventually start, you know, destroying things, because it's basically, to put it in like a very stark cognitive terms, it's an us versus them kind of mentality. So you identify an external like threat, enemy, whatever it is, and then you go after them, because destroying them is how I fix the problem. And then it leads all the way over to, like, it can just be destruction of property, but it could be destruction of human life itself.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and they would argue that that is how genocides get started.
That rings true for me, because as you were speaking there, I kept thinking in terms of like, if you're absencing, you're like sold on a particular framework or belief system, and maybe part of the reason that you then, if that escalates too much, you want to attack other things is because they threaten your belief system. And so you might attack this building, or let's say just Western democracy or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, let's say
because
the building is a bank, right?
yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah,
you're attacking a bank,
yeah.
and I mean, do banks not serve any purpose anymore?
Mm,
Or do they actually serve a function that allows, lots of people to have access to material comforts that they wouldn't otherwise be able to with just like cash,
right.
right? They do give credit. They allow people to purchase homes.
Mm-hmm.
They allow people to go to university.
Mm.
There are all these functions that are being served,
But if
and
you're
you
but if
take
you're
these things
absencing,
away.
you're not being present to that. You're abstracting it away. You don't see the real world. Yeah, you're absent from it in the same way you could be absent from a conversation. And so then maybe if instead of going on this absencing, if you rather go into a presencing, you could still like find meaning and make progress and find a cause to fight for, but it maybe would start from a place of listening and sort of absorbing things. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so that actual process, because there's a lot more detail to what the cycle of presencing involves. And in practice, a lot of it is interviewing.
Mm.
You go find people who don't hold your beliefs and you talk to them. And you practice like getting as deep into that listening as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And you watch yourself reacting to what someone's saying. Like, I'm trying to think of a particular like interview that I would have done, but sometimes people say things and you're like, you feel yourself flare up, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to debate them,
Yeah.
but I'm in this like I'm conducting a stakeholder interview and I cannot debate that, like, but
Mm.
I can ask questions about why do you hold that belief and like
Yeah.
where did that come from within you, and let's explore that together. What do you think would happen if you took that belief to its furthest extreme? It's kind of Socratic in nature.
Yeah.
And doing that, rather than like projecting your own thoughts and beliefs onto people and telling them they're wrong or attempting to correct them, you can lead them through a process that allows them to see for themselves the inconsistency or the like inconsistency or the problem, whatever the problem might be.
Yeah.
You allow them to see themselves from a different perspective that allows them to now go, oh, well, maybe I'm going to self-correct.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, all correction is self-correction. You can't really correct
Mm.
another person.
Yeah.
They have to want to do that.
Right. They at least have to let you correct them in maybe like a student-teacher type of relationship. But even
Yeah.
then, it's sort of well, it has to be voluntary.
Yeah, you give that consent
Yeah.
at some level.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're asking someone questions about their belief rather than reacting to how it makes you feel threatened or angry or whatever, the reason that's more effective is because they don't feel threatened either at that point. They feel free to explore. As soon as you start saying, criticizing them and saying they're wrong, you're threatening their identity to some degree, especially for the people who are really identify with certain ideologies. And then there's no chance for them to explore. And that's really what you need. I mean, because if you're in this conversation with somebody and they express some abhorrent opinion, what you would really like is for them to learn some better way of thinking. So, okay, well, if you want them to learn exploration, then it makes sense that would be necessary. You can't explore if you feel threatened.
Yeah, and you also can't explore if you only talk to people who hold your same beliefs.
Right.
Because
right.
you keep going around in the same territory and it's not new.
Yeah.
So I think that's another symptom of our social media obsession.
Yeah.
Because we get sorted into these groups that, okay, we all kind of think the same thing, and it's like amazing that you can find like-minded people, but then if you don't have the counterbalance to that, and it's all like-minded people all the time, you start to develop this idea that we're right.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Like
no one is right.
Yeah, and like how shocked the left was when Trump got elected. I think that was because they didn't realize the echo chamber they were in. Yeah, and then it's getting worse too because the algorithms are getting better at like, oh, you like that? Here's more of that. Oh, I know what you like. Here's more of that. So that's that's a bit freaky.
Yeah.
I go back and forth between really being concerned about that, and also kind of being like, it's not going to be a big deal, but it is. It's concerning, at least, the way the algorithms can kind of. I don't want to say AI because that for some reason the AI threat doesn't feel very concerning to me, but we'll say like the predecessor to AI, which is just the algorithms and maybe machine learning. Yeah, that gets a bit creepy. Sometimes I wonder, like, it'd be a good dystopian, like, science fiction novel if you wrote about an AI that came to awareness, but it came that way, but it was like from ads, like an ad bot. Like, what are we teaching? Like, the AI is coming, right? We're getting there, whether it's a year or 10 years or 100 years. And like right now, it's not really being like, it doesn't have the best environment to grow up in, you know, and that worries me a little bit.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. Yeah. It's a good way to think about it. The environment that is growing up in.
I think we have to treat it like a child that we are bringing into the world, because I don't think we're going to stop.
No, we're not going to stop.
Yeah.
If you think of it like a birthing process, you know, it's like, okay, you're 9 months pregnant and you're in labor. It's like, you're going to unmake the kid? No, it's coming out.
It's coming, yeah, and it almost does seem like it's so irresistible to us. It's like similar for having a kid. You know, we're driven to have sex and have a kid and raise the kid, and it almost seems like we're driven almost on the same level to like birth AI. It's like there's no possibility we'll stop, you know. And there's like this idea I've heard that humanity is the reproductive organs of technology, which is a pretty interesting idea.
I know, I love that idea. It's also kind of frightening. I'm like, how could you use me this way, technology? But
right.
It is cool. I think the only like leverage point that we have in terms of changing or shaping the trajectory along which this all evolves on is changing our relationship with the technology now. And this is something I've seen, especially recently with the whole, like, the racial issues in the US, because my friends who are back in the Caribbean are all like very caught up, very invested, very like affected by all of this, and it's like not happening locally in their own context. And like becoming very distressed and developing like severe anxiety and, you know, needing to be talked down.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of bizarre thing where you're kind of living in between these worlds. Like, at the same time, it's your world and you're connected to it in some way, but your actual day-to-day life isn't connected to the issue, and yet you're having a physiological response to it that can really affect the way that you do function. And I think what we need more than like mass culture and mass media and mass everything is for people to, like, I'm going to use the presencing word again, but re-presence themselves within their local context and like develop the things that are needed in your local context. And that's where like this thing about who is myself and what is my work comes in, because only you can affect your local context. Like you can get really invested, emotionally invested in something that's going on far away, but you can't affect it. But you will like absent yourself from something that's going on next door because you think you can affect it. But that is your domain of action. So I think about that a lot, and I think about how I can kind of coach people back to that state. Another project that I do is based in Antigua and Barbuda, and it's kind of that work, you know. It's theory U based, but it is really like trying to harness some of this energy that's flowing out there and plant it in the local context and allow it to grow and develop.
After the festival, people were asking what's next, and you actually asked that just a bit earlier, or well, you mentioned it. I don't know if it was really, if you were more quoting or expressing, but anyway, I think it's going to take I think we all need to have a mental shift where like some of the speakers in the festival were saying, you don't need to go write a book to change the world. You don't need to go build the platform, or you don't need to get 1 billion followers. You don't need to go make this global change. It's enough. I think the implication was, and what I've been thinking is like, it's enough just to, you know, bleed out your positive influence just around you. You don't need to go solve the world's problems. But it's kind of counterintuitive, and maybe it's just because the way we think in today's culture, or maybe yesterday's culture, the culture we're leaving, but that things need to be measurable somehow, and it's hard within this cultural context to think that it's enough to raise some kids, help your neighbor, and to grow a garden, you know, even though all of those things clearly are positive, but for some reason, because they don't like impact the whole world, it's hard to square that. Just speaking personally, it's a struggle, and it still doesn't feel resolved for me to square that with the vision I had of myself growing up. Like, I want to go and do, you know, big things and change the world and be a leader, and Elon Musk is my hero, you know. But yeah, there's no reason to think that anything more is needed than just to do good just around you. And I think, it just seems like that's a mental shift I'm trying to make. And I suspect it'll be something we all will be forced to make. And it's interesting, like, I wonder if we will be forced to, because as stuff gets more confusing and things break down more, like, the only framework you're going to have is like, okay, well, I have a backyard, I guess I'll go start a garden, because anything beyond that, like, you can't even navigate, you know, what's going to happen next year, who knows? So you might as well, like, you know, go help your neighbor and do this local stuff, because I think it'll narrow down to that's all that's left, you know.
Yeah, I wonder. Um, Something you said about squaring like the childhood vision that you had about yourself, going off and doing all these great things. Like, yeah, it resonates, because I had that too. And now I guess I still have it. I still have it. And I still have a hunger for scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I do too, for sure.
yeah, when I first started, but the other side of that is this kind of work, like we're talking about, you use the word a mental shift. Mm-hmm. It's all about, it's a transformation of consciousness. And I think partially what we're doing in these kind of conversations can do that. It can help to start that transformation. Mm. And that is kind of like planting seeds in people, because it does take a while to grow. Yes. But the way that you get to a scale in consciousness is, you know, you bring people together for these mass events, and then it kind of like, it doesn't end and then it's like, okay, it's done. It kind of goes like this. Yeah. It spreads out. It's like seeds dispersing, like bursting out of some kind of pot or something. Mm-hmm. They go out everywhere. Mm-hmm. They're planted, and then they grow. And you have a forest. So yeah, each individual tree doesn't need to be the tallest in the forest. Right. But what you need is the forest. Yeah. That's kind of how I try to think about it. And like, if I'm just a tree, or if I'm just like a clump of trees, you know, if I've somehow managed to have a bunch of different things going on, mm-hmm. then you know, it's kind of enough. Like, I'm contributing, and there are other people contributing, and it's a community of peers. And that's what's important. It's the community and doing it together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, you know, for a long time there's like a satisfaction of having a conversation with someone in a bar, for example. You're never going to meet them again, but you share an insight, and there's a comfort in knowing that you've planted a seed, even though you'll never see it again. And I think it's that second part that I can have trouble with, and I think people will have trouble with, is, yeah, you can do good, but if you can't actually see and witness directly, like, oh, that was because of me, I think that is involved. That's part of the shift we have to make. You know, we have to be comfortable with sort of giving really like a giving mindset, giving, and not so you can see tomorrow the fruits of your labor, but just because you know that it is making a difference, or at least probably, or at least most of the time, you know. Yeah, but I think that's the tricky part, is that you can't see it easily.
Yeah.
You go write a book and you sell a bunch of copies. That's okay. There you go. You're a success. You know it, or whatever. I mean, I don't know how long that satisfaction will really last, but instead, if you're going to if you traveled the world and went to bars and had nice conversations with people and generated insights, you would never see. You would live in the world that you made better, but you would never be able to point to anything and say, that's because of me. And you'd never be able to get that kind of ego rush. Anyway, I think that's the tricky part.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe part of the problem is hacking other ways to get the validation. Because we all need that validation, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I was thinking the other day too, even about, people who would typically be labeled as bigots or whatever. I think part of what drives that behavior, especially online, is like people looking for some form of validation. A lot of times, if you just acknowledge the emotion that's coming behind someone's speech and ignore what they said altogether, just be like, you sound really angry right now, dude. It shifts, it just shifts their whole, first of all, they're not expecting anyone to say that because they know that what they're saying is inflammatory, and the intention sometimes is to inflame others so that you can get into that conflict, because the conflict is addictive in its own way. But yeah, if you find a way to acknowledge what's behind it and to offer that validation and to allow the person to reveal more about themselves and to embark on that kind of exploration that we talked about earlier, that's a way to do it too. So I think in my own case, my attempt anyway, to hack it and to kind of receive the validation is, make a career of this. So at least I can get paid, So at least if I'm not, I can't point to specific things in the world. And I guess there's some things I can say, I worked on that, or I helped this, and I was with this organization. But knowing that I can make a living off of it says hey, people value what you do.
Yeah.
They're willing to give you their time and their money and trust you, trust me with their minds, which is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, that kind of just has to be, I don't know, for me that feels like enough, and it will be different for everyone, but find what is enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the recommendation.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And I suspect no one really needs the top of the world Elon Musk gratification. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect we could all, if we did some self-work, find that we could make local impacts and make meaningful connections locally, and just do relatively humble things, but still be that's enough, For me, for example, I'm really excited to have kids. I've been excited about that for a long time, and I've always known that I could fail everything else, but if I just have some kids and raise them well, I could, maybe it'll take a year or two of work to get over my failed dreams, but pretty quick I could be okay with that, Have a little garden, have a garage, Yeah.
I want to move to the countryside and homestead.
Yeah. Yes. I'm in the nomad lifestyle right now. I'm really eager to put down roots. Yeah,
it's necessary to have that grounding. And I was thinking, did you see Elon Musk's most recent Joe Rogan interview?
No.
He was talking about the fact that he's giving away a lot of his possessions.
Oh.
And when you said, not everybody needs to have that level of, achievement or validation or whatever it is. And then I see this guy who has all the things, and he's like, I don't actually need all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he called it an attack vector. He's like,
Huh.
it's just all this stuff that I have
We
that I've
would call it an
accumulated.
attack vector.
Yeah, it's like it's just a way for people to like come at me. It just gives them an excuse or a reason to,
Huh.
yeah.
Wow.
So it's like selling all his extra houses. He's like, I only need one house. Yeah. So seeing things like that, I'm like, yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe it is enough to do less.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and finding meaning is certainly, I think it's becoming well known now that finding meaning is almost in no way connected to being wealthy, or there's like this thin kind of success. And I think a lot of the culture agrees now that like finding meaning is a way more difficult question. Um, but yeah, what we're saying here is it doesn't need to be a grand, ambitious, world-changing plan. Well, it can be humble, I suppose. Maybe that's feels like that's at the core of the point for me. It can be quite humble and still be meaningful.
Yeah. Set your house in order.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and make it beautiful.
Exactly.
Yes, yes. Well, should we end it there?
I think so. That seems like a good resting point.
Okay, cool. Well, this was lovely. I'm really glad I wasn't limited to like an hour. I don't know what the time is now. I'm sure it's more than an hour, but I'm glad that we didn't have to cut it off because we really touched on a lot. That was very, very nice.
Yeah, and thank you again. This was, yeah, incredible. I
Cool.
enjoyed exploring with you, and really nice to meet you and get to know you a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was good for sure. Um, Once again, the trust has paid off. Trust in the conversation, and pretty soon it was taking off. Are you going to be in the Saturday call?
no, that's when I'm doing my workshop, so
Okay.
I will be in that until 1 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
1 o'clock my time.
Well, I'm sure we'll record a lot of it, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, I'll chat to you again sometime, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right.
Enjoy
Bye.
the rest of your day.
You too.